This is Billy Corben, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
Hey man, thanks a lot for coming on to our show. We're jazzed, we're honored, we love your movies, and this is great.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
What are you working on right now?
Oh, wow. What aren't we working on right now? We're in the midst of production and post-production simultaneously on a documentary miniseries for Spike TV, presently called the McAfee Project, about antivirus software pioneer John McAfee, who moved to Belize some years ago, kind of lost touch a bit with reality, and wound up being a person of interest in the murder of his fellow expatriate neighbor on the island of San Pedro, and wound up on the run. He fled the country, entered Guatemala illegally, and ultimately was deported to the U.S., where he essentially continued to not be a fugitive, but continue to be a person of interest. That's the term to the Belizean police in this murder, which is still almost 4 years later an unsolved crime in Ambergris Caye in Belize. And that's going to be premiering this fall in September. We just also began production on a feature documentary called Dawg Fight 2. That's spelled D-A-W-G. Lest people think that is a 30 for 30 about Michael Vick, Dawg Fight.
Well, we're waiting for you to make that one too, but the first Dawg Fight was amazing.
Yeah, we just started on Dawg Fight 2, which culminated in this fight between Dada 5000, Dafir Harris, and Kimbo Slice last Friday in Houston, which was, at the moment, is being considered one of the worst MMA fights in history. But when people find out what really happened in the ring that night, I think it will give the entire sports world a very different perspective on it. And I hope it won't take until 2017 when Dawg Fight 2 comes out for people to understand what it is that happened there.
Well, first off, it's two dudes in their 40s fighting, and neither one of those guys has lived an easy life. So I know there's more to that story, and you're the perfect guy to tell those stories. You're fantastic at that. So thanks for doing that. And I was going to ask, have you watched the miniseries Wild Dogs, where Billy Zane and his buddies go down to Belize, and there's a whole crazy... It's like a Three's Company version of the McAfee story. Have you seen this show at all?
No, I'm aware of it because some of the folks that we worked with down there while we were shooting it had worked on that show. It's an Amazon series, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yes, I heard a lot about it while I was down there, but I haven't had a chance to watch it.
So when you went down to Belize, how many people did you bring with you, or did you show up there and sort of muster people to work as a crew? Or is there a native population of folks who work on films in Belize?
Well, there's only about 340,000 people in the entire country. So there's not a lot of production, but there's a couple people, they do have a film commission, and there are a couple production companies that do their best to promote production in Belize. It is a beautiful country. It's relatively affordable. It's a developing nation. So there were people, one person in particular had a company called Make Belize Entertainment and Make Belize Films, and his name, the guy who headed the production company, was called Matthew Klink, and he was the man that was going to be kind of our local producer and fixer, and he actually was murdered about 3 or 4 days before we were scheduled to go to Belize. He's a Canadian expatriate who's lived in Belize for 5 years, and he's the founder of Make Belize, and he really was kind of championing Belize as a location. He was bringing in, I think he brought a telenovela in. There was a lot of projects that he was working on to try to make Belize generate some revenue and an economy around the film industry there. And his murder at first, obviously came as quite a shock. He was a young man, and we didn't know if it was related. Here we are on the eve of our trip to go kind of investigate this story and this unsolved murder in Belize, and our producer, who is working with us, locally, is murdered. So that kind of threw our plans into a bit of turmoil. Our trip was delayed by about 2 weeks. We were able to regroup with his business partner in the production company and make the trip, where we spent 3 weeks there. We did bring our director of photography, down with us and a sound guy with us from America for part of the trip. Then we had a couple local hires as well. That's a tough thing to do even in the U.S. When you go around to another state to shoot and we can't always budget-wise afford to bring everybody along with us, so you do local hires for the crew, and then it just becomes kind of relying on your local UPM or Googling the people and looking at their resumes to know how qualified they are. But it is a bit like a box of chocolates as far as Gump would say. That's not just in Belize, but anywhere you go.
Yeah, that sounds like, well, with Belize you have the added dynamics of that it's across a border. It's not like, it's one thing to go, well, we're going to go to New Mexico for a tax break or whatever, and we're going to go hire a UPM down there. You're in Belize. So, first of all, let me just say this, because we didn't really, by way of introduction, I have to say that I'm a documentary hound. I love documentaries. I watch a documentary practically every day, and I don't know what Pete's frequency is, but he watches a lot of documentaries as well. So, I just found this channel called Curiosity Stream, not a sponsor, so I'm not plugging them, but they are, they're like Netflix, but all documentaries, and they're $5 a month. So my kid goes, all documentaries? Dad, that's like a porn website for you. But the thing is, you as a filmmaker, right. I should say you and Alfred as filmmakers, give us documentaries with masculine subject matter. I love history documentaries. I love all kinds of things. I just like to pack my brain full of stuff. But the subjects that you choose are the ones that, for guys like Pete and myself, we look at each other and we're watching documentaries, but we want to see documentaries about guys who hit people.
Yeah.
And we want to see documentaries about towns going into a tailspin and how things recover from just absolute chaos. And these seem to be, just masculine themes for a documentary. So in terms of the documentarian who speaks to our generation, I think you're sort of like Ken Burns with bigger, hairier balls.
Well, certainly bigger. I don't know if they're hairier. I will. I will say that a friend many years ago dubbed our genre pop docs, POPDOCS. That the documentaries we make don't tend to be the kind of laid back, stale, conservative kind of socially conscious documentaries about the Holocaust or civil rights or things that a lot of the docs that we grew up, those were the only ones that won Oscars. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're like the kind of ones that were decidedly uncool, maybe well made, maybe important, maybe even extraordinary films, but not ones that you would necessarily continue to revisit like you would a favorite movie, and
absolutely.
Yeah, so our pop docs, we tend to steer more into, first, the type of subject matter that we're attracted to is a bit pulpier, and then our style, I think, is a little bit more pop culture zeitgeistier, where it becomes a little more watchable and a little bit more appealing for a broader audience. Specifically, I think you mentioned our generation. Specifically, I think for a younger audience that perhaps either wasn't necessarily interested in documentaries before, or if they did, hadn't quite come out of that closet, to say we're like, oh, I love documentaries, that's a cool thing to watch, to admit, or basically people who were like watching a lot of true crime or doc type programming on cable TV, but there was never really a legit kind of way to say, or legit genre in documentary filmmaking that said, this is badass, and I can kind of say I am a proud documentary fan.
But this is my question though about that. That did not exist. So going into film, you could have said, I'm going to make sensational films like Steven Spielberg. I'm going to make foreign films that no one in America is going to watch. I'm going to make documentaries that no one's going to watch. But you said, I'm going to make documentaries, but people are going to watch them. How did you know that? Did you figure it out while you were doing it? Did you just say, I'm going to do this different? What was your thought process going into that?
We just wanted to make movies and tell stories. That's why we named our company Raconteur, Rakontur, the phonetic spelling of a French word that means one who tells stories with skill. So we didn't really know what genre we wanted to work in or care what genre we were going to work in or what format it was going to be. Was it going to be film? Was it going to be video? Was it going to be long form, short form, theatrically released, streaming on the web, which was just starting to happen, YouTube and Napster when we started, or Napster first and then later YouTube when we started our careers. We just wanted to make movies and tell stories. And so, I was always intrigued with true crime. I almost exclusively read nonfiction books. I never really saw the point in fiction, why am I going to waste my time doing this when there's so much to learn about, with the world and what has happened and what is happening. We were all news junkies growing up. My producing partners, Alfred Spellman and David Sipkin. David is a historian, really. He's particularly a war historian and is just an avid reader of all things with respect to America's wars, America's military, the Middle East. He's just he's a scholar of that, really, in his spare time.
Nice.
And so we were all interested in telling historical stories, but yet we grew up in, let's be honest, an MTV era, an era of short attention span theater, where the ADD era of just needing a certain style to ensure that we were gripped and intrigued and paying attention. So I think we just took the style that we grew up with, and I say it's one of my favorite sayings, and it's a pin. I think it's my pinned tweet. But I say the job of a documentary filmmaker is to find a good story and then don't fuck it up.
Amen.
And obviously that's easier said than done. If it was easy, then everybody would do it. But that's really the fundamental. If it's a true story, and I recognized early on the truth was truly stranger than fiction, especially in fucking Florida. I mean, just like and in the last decade or less, even in recent years, Florida fuckery has become a whole genre unto itself.
Oh yeah. It's such a and I used to live in Southern Florida also. I lived in Broward County, so I know. And I used to have a route delivering porta shitters, and I one day was
that's what you did for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was I was out on my route trying to find places to deliver porta shitters, and I got out because it's hot. I'm sweaty, so
where can I put this?
Yeah. Well, I sold them. Someone else actually put them out, but I had to go find places. So I wander into this convenience market, and the guy looks at me and he's like, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm hot. I wanted to get something to drink." And he's like, "You shouldn't be here." And I'm like, "How do you know what you're talking about?" But he was trying to warn me and say, "Get the hell out of here." This is not a place for you, white dude. And within a few months of me moving down there were a number of cops shot and killed. That stuff doesn't happen. But when you have people like the largest El Salvadorian population outside of El Salvador and the largest Colombian population outside, when that happens, those country cultural clashes, they continue, and they are all isolated down there in, as down in Southern Florida. It's dicey in some places, and they're great stories.
Yeah, there's a common misconception, I always say, about Miami in particular, that we're a melting pot. We are not a melting pot at all. We're far more akin to a TV dinner where sometimes the peas fall over into the mashed potatoes because we self-segregate. We always find a way to stick to our own, just naturally, organically, kind of move that way. And so you then get neighborhoods that are isolated. You get neighborhoods where people stick to their own, and then you have this incendiary kind of a blend. And more tragic than that is that people don't really have a collective experience, where it's like, oh, well, shit, that happened in Aventura. That doesn't affect me down in Coconut Grove. Well, that happened in Liberty City. That doesn't affect me in Miami Beach. Or that happened in West Perrine. I don't care about that in Coral Gables. There's 34 different municipalities. That's 34 different mayors in Miami-Dade County alone in South Florida. So it gets we get really isolated, and we stop realizing that, these highways that connect us all, that we all sit in this miserable traffic on, that's a collective, that's a shared experience. We all have that stress. We all get it. We all understand each other. Why do we have to hate each other about it? And it's really kind of a bummer. It's like, I always say that's why they call it Miami. It's not your Ammy or our Ammy. It's my fucking Ammy. We're a needlessly angry and selfish people. I mean, it's a beautiful place down here. You'd think everybody could just chill out and say, well, shit, this is a great city. This is a great town. Yeah, what the fuck are we complaining about all the damn time? It's just relax, and just like, okay, I drive to work every day. I live on the mainland, and our office is Miami Beach, so I commute. I mean, it's not the most pleasant commute in the world, but I'll be damned if it's not the most beautiful. And we tend to have weird hours, so fortunately I don't tend to hit rush hour. But shit, if I were hitting rush hour on the Causeway, it's the most beautiful view you've ever seen. And there's not a day that goes by, I should say twice a day, because I make the round trip if I don't have to pull an overnighter at the office in an editing session or something. But twice a day, I never cease to look out at the view of the water, of the skyline, which looks nothing like the skyline I grew up with, but regardless, or irregardless, as the kids say in Miami, I look at that skyline and I thank my lucky stars. I think what a blessing it is. A lot of Americans go to work every day. They don't get to see this view. They're landlocked. They don't get to see the water and have this stunning kind of view. And I think we're very blessed, and I think that not enough people really appreciate that.
There are some wonderful things about Southern Florida, and I'll include West Palm and Broward in that too. And there are some beautiful, beautiful people down there. I mean, if you want to feel fat and ugly, you just walk around down there and just like, man, I'm walking around like a schlub. These people are dressed up nice. They look fantastic. Everybody's just got a little bit of sweat on them. Oh man, it's a sexy, sexy place.
Yeah, it's a quirky place because you refer to South Florida like Palm Beach and Broward, and really there's like that I-4 corridor that runs right through the middle of the state from Tampa to Orlando, and that corridor, which really cuts Florida in half, is really the delineation between North and South Florida. In fact, even the city of South Miami actually had a purely kind of ceremonial vote where the commissioners passed a resolution to recommend that we turn Florida into two states like the Carolinas, a North Florida and a South Florida, which is actually a wonderful idea because I always see, Florida is kind of like America's red penis with like a blue foreskin that the North wishes they could circumcise right off the rest of the state. The problem is that like all the revenue comes from South Florida. All the tax revenue, all the tourist dollars comes from Orlando to the Florida Keys. So they love our money. They don't love our politics or our ideology or our variety, let's say, of cultures. But so Florida itself is this really tense state, perpetually at civil war, up in Tallahassee in the state capitol. That makes it, I'm not complaining, that makes it a damn interesting place to be. I always, the saying I always turn to is that Los Angeles is where you go when you want to be somebody, New York is where you go when you are somebody, and Miami's where you go when you want to be somebody else.
That's
and
right.
Florida has always been a sunny place for shady people.
I do. I've worked overseas a lot and in conflict zones and talked to a lot of crazy people. So I'm a question asker, and I want to understand what your opinion on these things is. And at one point, I was trying to map the South. Where does the Southern lifestyle stop? And I believe you're right. Like anything north of Interstate 4 geographically, but more importantly, when you order iced tea, if you get sweet tea automatically, you're for sure in the South. Yeah. If it's an option, you're maybe in the South. But if they just bring you regular iced tea, you're not. You get down to Southern Florida. No one even orders iced tea, first of all. But
no, we order café con leche, cafecito, y cortadito. Yeah, that's what we get.
And then, is the Conch Republic really part of Southern Florida, or are they their own state?
Yeah, the Keys is an interesting place. It kind of that and some parts of like the West Coast, like into Everglades City and Naples and Monroe County, which constitutes the Keys, is probably sort of the last bastion of South Florida crackers, the kind of people who pronounce it Miami instead of Miami. And it's kind of a wonderful subculture because they're Southern, but they're like a kind of tolerant Southern, like not a hateful Southern, they're not, and especially in the Keys, they're not flying, the Stars and Bars, they're flying the Conch Republic. They have their own damn state, they have their own damn state that's not just a state, it's a state of mind,
And it's not like the South shall rise again, because they were never put down.
No, and in fact, they're kind of, but they still have their own kind of mistrust for the federal government, based in the Everglades City, based off the fact the federal government continuously impeded their ability to make a living, all the way from, fishing in the state park when they made the national park of the Florida Everglades, all the way through marijuana pot hauling, marijuana smuggling. The feds always seem to come in and rain on their parade. In the Keys, it was a similar thing. When they first created the Conch Republic, when the mayor of Key West decided to secede from the Union, it was because they had put a stranglehold on the Florida Keys by up there in Florida City, which is the only road in and out of the Keys, Monroe County. They because of all the drug smuggling through the Keys, they set up a checkpoint which completely strangled the ability of the Keys to anybody to come or go. And so they sued the federal government. They came to the federal courthouse in Miami. They seceded from the Union, declared war on the United States of America. They surrendered and requested immediate aid for from the U.S. government, which is obviously more of a kind of a funny protest, but very sincere, in their steadfastness about the feds choking the life out of their economy.
Yeah, what I love about Keys, particularly the Key West, because that kind of defines it for me, is you can go down there and go sit in a bar. And you're going to meet someone, like you said, like a Southern cracker who's just out there catching tarpon all day long, drinking warm beers on a boat, does not care because he doesn't have to care. Everything's taken care of, But you also might sit next to a tranny or a special forces guy that's going through scuba school or just some college kids that are there to party. And I've been to Key West, I don't know, a bunch of times, and you never see fights down there. It's just a place where people... You take off your shirt, you walk around with an open beer around town.
Plus, Pete doesn't like pants.
I don't like pants. The Garden of Eden, you don't have to wear clothes in that bar. But that kind, you don't have to worry about all those other pretenses. You just go down, and if you got a freak flag, you fly it. And if not, they'll hang out with someone who's got their freak flag up.
Shit, this is very much a clothing optional state, especially the further south you get. It's the classic, no shirt, no shoes, no problem kind of town.
That's right. I want to let our listeners in, if they don't already know, that you mentioned Everglades City, and if you haven't seen Billy's film Square Grouper, you need to check it out, because the exploration of Everglades City and what happened there and them getting choked out of being able to fish in the Everglades National Park, that's a fascinating story, and your ability to get that material out of a place that is, that's a town of, how many people are in Everglades City? 500?
Yeah, well, back in the 1970s, it was about 500 people, and today in 2016, it's about 500 people.
Wow. So your ability to infiltrate that place and get that material out of them, because that's a hushed community.
Oh, absolutely. Part of the reason at first it was so difficult for the DEA to get in there is because everybody was related. It's 500 people and 4 or 5 last names in the whole town. I remember one of the guys, Lebo Noble, that we interviewed in Square Grouper. He said he had to get a driver's license to lose his virginity because he was related to everybody in the town. So he'd get the hell out of there and meet a woman that wasn't a cousin or whatever. So it was such a tight knit group that the feds couldn't get people to flip on each other.
Anyway,
yeah. They couldn't get people to flip on each other because they weren't going to flip on their family. So they had to go undercover, open up their own fish house, pose as smugglers themselves to really get in there. And today it continues to be a pretty tight-lipped place. Everybody's gone on to legit businesses, mostly in the tourist trade, the fishing trade, the tour guide and airboat tours kind of trade, and so people don't necessarily like to revisit that kind of stuff, but I find that people are really intrigued by it, and that it actually, even in Miami after Cocaine Cowboys, helps to, I think, drive interest in the area and bring visitors and tourists in who want to see where it all went down.
Yeah, Cocaine Cowboys, man. Watching that film was just an experience for me because I never experienced Miami at that time. And first of all, I think we need to tip our cap to you for getting Jan Hammer to fucking score the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was a stroke of genius. And no other place and no other time could really relate to it.
Billy made me realize that I love smugglers. I'm not big on drug dealers because those guys get violent, but like all the smuggler guys were like, man, we are making so much money. We had so many ladies. I'd buy cars. And we would just, they're just laid back. They're not trying to conquer the world. They're just trying to work and enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, they're the romantics in that. That's Han Solo.
Yeah, exactly. I like those guys. But, I had a little tiny taste of Miami back in that era. Our family went down in the early, mid-'80s for vacation. And we got there, and we're going to stay in the Jolly Roger Hotel, which is just a dump. And we get there, and there's some dude outside of his room scaling balconies trying to get away from cops. And they were trying to figure out how to catch a guy who was willing to go outside on the balconies. And I'm thinking, this is the best place ever.
Right. You don't have to turn the TV on.
Yeah.
You just have to look outside.
Action is right here. I'm on the beach looking up at some guy trying to dodge the cops. How cool of a vacation is this?
Well, it's unfortunately still kind of like that in Miami. You just forget the big screen TV. You just need to open up the curtains and look out the window to be entertained. But yeah, I mean, that era in Miami was one that we grew up in, Alfred and Dave and I, and was a story we always wanted to tell, because one of the kind of intriguing things about Cocaine Cowboys is just the extensive use of local archive news footage that documented the craziness of the drugs and the murder and the mayhem. And that was in an era where not everything went through like a PIO or a public relations person and you have cops that just would do ride-alongs with the media and speak about as candidly as possible and really express the frustration and the extraordinary situation that they were faced with down here, which was that they were outmanned and outgunned. And it was just extraordinary. And so we grew up watching that news footage. That was our childhood, sitting at the kitchen table while mom was making dinner with the 5 o'clock local news coming on and watching that. And when I first got all that, when I first watched the footage, as Dave and Alfred and I were gathering it from the archives, I sat down and watched it all together. We would get screeners on VHS, of course, and we're watching the footage. And I all together, it's one thing when you see it drips and drabs from day to day, as you're growing up, but like here it all was, hours on end. And I called up my mom and I said, "What the fuck were you thinking raising children down here back then?"
Yes.
If you like the show,
and you do,
send us some pictures of your movies.
don't do that. Support the show.
There are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics and helps us get better placement. Number 2,
Visit our website.
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay, you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
We like boobies.
I find all criminals or anybody who breaks the law in a significant way still manages to have some sort of internal moral justification for it. Why I did. They all think they have a good reason, for why they did what they did. And I find that, one of the things that Mickey Monday, the smuggler we interview in the redneck smuggler we interview in Cocaine Cowboys, is that, he saw it as he was providing a transportation service. He wasn't buying drugs or selling drugs or even using drugs. Right. He was, in fact, didn't even drink, still doesn't. I'll sit at a bar with him and he'll have, he used to drink cranberry juice and then he started gaining weight from the sugar, so he just started to drink water. And that's how he rolls. But Mickey, looked at it as, here I have these incredible resources. He was kind of a MacGyver type, so he enjoyed having the money to kind of build new and exciting gadgets, come up with creative ways to kind of outsmart the man, the opposition, as he put it, and what he did with fuel bladders and what he did with fiberglass boats was just, some of it was nothing short of genius. Unfortunately, he was on the wrong side of the law.
Yeah, but you got to love it. And right, someone's going to move that stuff. May as well be a guy that's, not going to contribute to the problem even more, than that. So I don't know. I love smugglers. You really can down South Florida go sit down in any old bungalow bar and strike up a conversation with a guy, and they all have a tale to tell about their time in that era.
Here's Pete justifying Mickey's justifying of his justifying.
I love it.
So, but what I dug, and I'm no better. Honestly, I don't remember his gentleman's name. I called him a gentleman, but he's a convict, and he was the hitman. who moved from Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And I was fascinated by him, and I dug just the way that he, let's face it, man. I watched Cocaine Cowboys because it was riveting. It was terrific. I'm far too old for all this shit, but I love cocaine. You know what? If you make a movie about hookers, I'm going to watch that too. So the thing is, when it comes to, though, making that movie and using all that archival news footage, the beautiful thing about it was that you were telling this great story, and you got to watch the characters in the great story and go, look at that fucking mustache on this guy. They had all that going for them, too.
Look at all those white pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say in Miami we wear white clothes from Labor Day to Labor Day.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
Hey, I want to slightly change gears a little bit. I listened to your show. I think it was with Jay Moore that you did on his podcast, and you guys talked about the difficulties in marketing a dog fight. And because the movie was too urban, they said. And I'm wondering what happened now with Dawg Fight 2. Are you guys going to go with a more non-traditional route again in marketing the film? Has someone ponied up and said, "Yeah, we want this film. We want to get it out there"? Or what's the story with the second version?
Well, I'm hoping that Netflix will come on board, a lot earlier and help out so that we're not out of pocket. I mean, we're still, I'm not, play the world's smallest violin for me, but we spent our own money on Dawg Fight. We carried it for a lot of years and still haven't recouped yet the money that we spent on it. It was a labor of love, I mean, you gotta do those sometime. And so I'm just as excited, if not more so, especially after the miracle that just happened with Dada 5000 surviving. Very traumatic medical episode that he suffered during his fight against Kimbo Slice on Friday. I'm just as bullish on this one, if not more so, than I was on the first one. You literally have a man fighting for his life in a hospital right now. He's out of the woods miraculously. His recovery is just absolutely remarkable. Phenomenal, as one of the nurses put it, while I was visiting him in the room and in the ICU. And he should be out of the hospital, I'm hoping, within the next week or so,
right.
Which is just amazing considering what happened. And, Kimbo Slice didn't beat him, but Dada's own body actually did.
He just is the one that stood up the longest. And you're right. Yeah, if he would have had that happen anywhere else, I mean, you're lucky to have medical facilities right there ready to go, because he basically dies in the ring. Otherwise, it is incredible that he's recovering.
Well, look, I'm glad.
And what's incredible to me is that it sounds like a diss track or some pre-fight press conference shit talk, but Kimbo Slice could not knock out a dying man. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yes. While that might be factual, we are talking about a dying man who bench presses 600 pounds. So, I'm really, really elated that he's recovering and that he's miraculous as it is. I'm glad that it happened, because it's just not right if the story ends that way. We can't have, even though it was, like you said, it was Dada's body failing him. We can't have Kimbo killing Dada. That's just not how that ends.
Well, I mean, it's
not in my heart.
What went down is that's how it begins, really. I mean, and that's how Dawg Fight 2 was always intended to begin, was with that fight, because I knew that everybody all over the world would know the outcome coming into Dawg Fight 2, so it seemed illogical that we could build any suspense, leading up to that fight. So the plan was, and still is, to begin Dawg Fight 2 and begin the production of Dawg Fight 2 as we had with the Kimbo fight, and then spend a year in the life of Dada 5000 in 2016, do post-production, and release it in 2017, as I said, knock wood, hopefully on Netflix.
I can't wait for that movie.
One of my favorite things about Dawg Fight was the cultural misunderstanding between the fight commissioner and the guys who were out in West Perrine fighting. And he's saying, hey, this is dangerous. There's no doctor around. People can die. People are going to go to jail. It's like, hey, dude, that's their life every day. The one time when this isn't a worry is when they're fighting. Even the cops take time off to let these guys do this. And I love that you were able to highlight that, because you're right. It's easy to be off back in the ranches off to the west of Miami or, Coral Gables and not worry about what's going on there. But the reality is those guys really live these hard lives. And if this is their respite, and if Dada 5000 is their guy that the town rallies around and supports, well, damn, I want to know that story. I want to understand that better before I don't want to walk in their shoes. So show me what it looks like, because they've got a hard life, and it's fascinating.
Well, not to sound like some bleeding heart manatee hugger, but I'll tell you that living in a community like Miami, you become more empathetic to a lot of different cultures. And I'll say that, you don't get to choose your parents. I mean, you're born into this world, and you open your eyes and you say, okay, you got to deal with the hand you're dealt. You got to play that hand. Yep. Some people can't handle it. Some people fold. Some people for good reason. Some people for no reason at all. But you don't get to decide, to make a lot of decisions coming into this life. But it's what you do after that that's going to make a decision. It's very easy for people, obviously, who come into this world with opportunity, with good parents, from a secure home, to say, well, why can't you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but the truth of the matter is there are people who are born into situations and into communities where there is no hope, where there is no opportunity, where their politicians do not serve them, hence underserved communities, or unserved populations. And the truth of the matter is that there's very little you can do from that standpoint. So you have street hustlers, you have entrepreneurs, who try to come up with opportunities, and God knows it's better than slinging dope. It's better than being a gangbanger and Dada, as you saw. And I will, I'm pretty bullish on government transparency and accountability, because I think we have a government that is not transparent or accountable to its people. But I will defend the Miami-Dade Police Department down in the Southwest, who I think did a seminal job of community policing in a very, very difficult neighborhood. I heard a lot of people who are like, well, why aren't they stopping it? Why are they letting it go down? And the truth of the matter is because there'd be a greater threat.
Yes.
If they shut it down, if they rolled up on somebody's private yard and pushed all those people out of the yard and into the street. That would be a much more dangerous situation. Everybody, and myself included, we all complain about when police officers show up and escalate a situation rather than attempt to de-escalate a situation or attempt to use means other than lethal force. And here's a perfect example of, I think, some superb policing, community policing, who said, okay, we know what the law is, but we also have the ability to selectively apply and enforce it. And we're evaluating the situation and saying, well, hell, we know where everybody in the neighborhood is right now. We know
right.
The streets are quiet. The drug dealers are gone. There's nobody throwing guns around. You have some people, consenting adults, who are going onto private property and voluntarily engaging in this sport. And everybody's there, and everything is peaceful, but for that 12-by-12 ring. But again, you got people who are willing to engage in that. And again, just think of the riot they could cause. Think of the injuries, and think of of what could go down if they would roll up on the house and say, we're shutting it down, squeezing you all out of the backyard onto the street. I mean, good luck with that.
Yeah, just the exodus alone, and the trampling, and you're right, you got a riot on your hands.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you had police who actually are part of that community, who understand that community, and who say, we know who the real bad guys are, right. And we're not going to treat everybody and their neighbors and their kids like criminals, because that doesn't breed mutual respect with the police and the community that they're policing.
One of the differences in South Florida, too, is the influx of immigrants. We've got a thing with the Syrians, and what are we going to do with them and everything else. And we pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the families get to say, but we wear sandals? You know, they need a minute to figure these things out, right? So if you're Jamaican or Bahamian or you're from Trinidad or whatever it is, that place that you're from.
Or if you just got let out of a Cuban prison.
Yeah, well, they got this thing called wet foot, dry foot. You get one dry foot, you get to stay, right? Well, that person now has to figure out, you know, all those stories like when the guy, the old granddad's like, I had $2 in my pocket when I got here and I robbed a guy to get $5 and some guy robbed me and I had nothing and I made it. Like, that's the stories that are happening every day in Florida. People are inventing it as they go. And sometimes, if they're not illegal, they're extra legal for sure. And they're just doing what they can to survive.
Well, you know, we have a Cuban majority here. You know, they're not a minority; they're the majority, and that's made for some very colorful politics and obviously a very, I would say, inequitable immigration policy, where you have Haitian immigrants who are facing horrible conditions back at home, who are locked up in Chrome Detention Center or regardless of whether they make it to our shores, are sent back home, in some cases to certain death. I mean, if not by famine or poverty or violence, then by some kind of natural disaster that seems to befall Haiti on an almost
twice a year.
Annual. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's horrible. You know, and that we've come up with this, you know, that we maintain this archaic immigration policy, a total product of the Cold War, is just completely, I mean, I'll say it. It seems to be totally, if not arbitrary, then at least racist. It's like the idea that Haitians are economic refugees where Cubans are political refugees. That's just a fallacy. That's just not fair. That's what we tell ourselves to justify it. But that is completely, it's a total double standard. And the truth of the matter is that I think you got to either welcome everybody with open arms and open hearts, as Jimmy Carter said during the disastrous Mariel boat lift, which really turned Miami upside down. I mean, it was borderline treasonous. What happened? Well, you know what the president allowed to happen here. I'm not suggesting he should have locked everybody up or sent them all away, but he created a policy and then didn't provide any aid or any. Yeah. Yeah, or any federal assistance. They're like, okay, you guys deal with it. You absorb, you know, nearly 200,000 refugees, who many of whom had no food, no shelter, no clothing, no medical attention. It nearly bankrupted the southern four counties. You know, Palm Beach, Broward, Metro-Dade in those days it was called, and Monroe, and basically said you're on your own until I think it was. One of those cases, one of the first times where, you know, the state really went up against the feds for the first time since the Civil War. You had a situation that again, completely turned this community upside down. You know, a lot of wonderful people who came in as a result, but there was no way to effectively vet those who were not wonderful people, and I don't think they, you know. And here's the interesting thing: it sounds like I'm talking about today. It does. Sounds like, and that's a really interesting thing about Florida. T.D. Ullman once wrote that the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow, especially South Florida. We are the bellwether for America. If you want to know what challenges or calamities will befall the nation in a decade or two or three to come, you just need to see what's going down in Florida right now. You know, I mean, you name it. We are ground zero for it all. Medicare fraud, tax ID fraud, PIP fraud, serial killers, certainly mortgage fraud and bank fraud in the Great Recession, immigration, drug smuggling, you know, all the shit that's happening on the West Coast and with the border states in California and Texas and Arizona and out of Mexico. We went through all that 30 years ago. You know, the immigration issue. We went through all that 30 years ago. I mean, it's all, you know, and we can better solve these problems, obviously. You know, I mean, you know, what do they say about, you know, being doomed to repeat history? You know, that seems to be the unfortunate reality is that these are not new issues. These are issues that Florida dealt with many decades ago.
Well, you know, some of the issues just stay, like the war on drugs. I mean, you guys feel that more than anybody else because you guys are the port of entry for most of that stuff. So, you know, in the 80s, there was cocaine on every dollar bill out there. Now there's Oxycontin on every dollar bill out there, you know, and pain. I mean, there's people in pain. There's pain clinics. And that stuff is going to look. The war on drugs turned the pharmaceutical companies into the ability to sell drugs legally, and people are going to get fucked up. That's what they're going to do, and it's terrible and it ruins lives, but people are terrible and they ruin their own lives sometimes. That's just how it goes. And to fight that's impossible.
And I feel like you're right. The things that you guys went through 30 years ago, we're in California and we do go through some of those things now, but we have a lot less coke. Anyway, so
well, I think you're right.
Years ago, and ask you because Pete touched on it earlier. You are clearly you're a graduate of the U, and you documented some of the interesting things that have happened at the U. Tell us some of your thoughts about the NCAA.
Oh boy. Listen, I mean, our founding fathers in their infinite wisdom realized that you needed checks and balances. You needed a separation of powers. You needed there to be independent entities of the government that would create the laws, enforce the laws, and interpret those laws. The NCAA turns all of that on its head by making them all one and the same.
Yep.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And and not only does the NCAA create the rules, enforce the rules, and interpret the rules, but they also are being enriched by those actions. And so you just have a total breakdown in good governance. It's
of
just
all that is decent.
Absolutely. It is a total, and you have a workforce that is totally unrepresented in the process. When athletes, they call them student athletes, I think that's a misnomer, I call them college athletes. When the college athletes find themselves accused of misdeeds, and incidentally, a misdeed or a violation of an NCAA bylaw, and these bylaws, you print them all out and stack them up, are taller than me, which isn't saying much, but that's still pretty tall. There are lawyers in private practice who get paid hundreds of dollars an hour who focus on NCAA bylaws, okay, who are enriched by this completely archaic system. And what these bylaws could be, now let me give you an example. If you are a college athlete who has a student tutor, for example, like an undergraduate, or a graduate student who's tutoring you, and within the athletic department, and they give you a pen or a pencil to use, that can be construed as an impermissible benefit. Okay, if you are an employee of the athletic department, even a graduate assistant coach, let's say, and you are driving home or driving off of campus, and you see a student athlete in the pouring rain, thunder, and lightning, waiting for a shuttle or for a bus, and you give them a ride home, that could be an impermissible benefit. That can result in sanctions, suspension of scholarship. So this is how so even common courtesy and human decency goes out the window with you just looking out for a brother, for a fellow student, or for a player who's sitting in the thunder, lightning, and rain. You can't do that. You have to change your behavior, and you couldn't even treat them like you would any other student on campus. You would just
be decent. Yeah.
That decency and human kindness and common courtesy it could be an impermissible benefit or a violation of the NCAA sanctions. Now, once you are accused of such a horrible, horrible misdeed, I don't know, such as getting compensated with a free $70 tattoo, or somebody buying you a meal in exchange for signing your name on a jersey with your number on it that the school and the NCAA sells for their own profit. God forbid. God forbid.
And for no profit to you, by the way.
None. And if you commit one of these horrible sins against the NCAA, they'll initiate some kind of investigation or action against you. And guess what? Guess who, according to your contract, the scholarship is a contract, who represents you in that matter? The school does. Yeah. You don't get to your own independent rep or lawyer or investigator. The school is the one who represents you. But I have a question. what happens, as was the case, I think, in several of the University of Miami investigations, when the best interests of the university and the individual players diverge. Yeah. When you don't have when the university, for example, is willing to throw the players under the bus to save their own asses, or to save their coaches' asses, or to make sure that they don't get the best. Yeah, that they don't get the death penalty for or whatever for the school, but they're willing to throw some kid under the bus who has to pay back the $75 for a meal that he got from a booster, because the same boosters, by the way, that they push these kids at, they tell you this guy's important. Treat this man with respect. So what happens if you're out and about at a nightclub in Miami and that guy waves you over to his private table? What do? You tell him to go fuck himself? No, you get in trouble. The university tells you go. If you're at an officially sanctioned event, they send you to dinner with this guy or this lady. They tell you.
Right, they whore you out.
Yes,
they whore you. But then when you're not in one of these quote controlled settings, it's like when I said it's just not. You have these university presidents. And you have these, Mark Emmert and the NCAA people, the sanctioning body, who basically they wave their finger in the face of a student athlete with one hand, okay, while they're grabbing a check, with the other hand, and they go, "Do as I say, not as I do." I mean, that kind of hypocrisy is so blatant, especially to kids who come from the streets. And let's face it, the average. You look at the percentage of minorities and underprivileged young men who join the NBA or the NFL, and that there is a not unusual demographic that tends to be successful in professional athletes. Being a professional athlete, it's one of the most legitimate merit systems that we know. You know what I'm saying? If you are good at it, you will find a way, to get a job and to succeed at it. It's not so much. It's not who you know, but it's what you can do and how you can perform. Yes, you can promote yourself better and maybe raise your stock. But if you're a good player, and you're going to get an opportunity to play the game, and so kids that savvy, okay, who know their value in the system, they see that kind of hypocrisy and they reject it, and rightfully so.
The other thing, too, about the NCAA is all this is done under the veil of, hey, we have to protect the integrity of the game. We don't want the same schools with a lot of money winning all the time. But guess what? The same schools win all the time. And we all know that all the boosters out there do things for students. It's just, who's getting caught this year, who's not. I say this, forget all that crap. Get rid of the NCAA as it stands right now. Let the boosters support the program. Let the Boilermakers spend as much as they want on a quarterback. I mean, how much money – Willis McGahee had a nice career in the NFL, but how much money did he leave on the field at the Rose Bowl when when he blew his knee out as a college player? That's not right. That if he hadn't made it back and didn't have a decent NFL career,
the NCAA would not have –
they wouldn't have cut him a check.
No.
They would have said,
well, you get a degree. For any of his interests at all.
Absolutely. I think the players should be insured so that there is some kind of assurance and insurance for loss of potential income and revenue. Certainly they should be insured from a medical standpoint. And I don't know that all of the tenets of a free market economy would be effective in the, quote, amateur. It's amateur for only the players, but professional for everybody else. I mean, yeah. Nick Saban makes $7 million a year and lives in an $11 million house. Now, I'm not suggesting he doesn't earn that, but that is true supply and demand. I would have to say, I think Mark Emmert makes, about $2 million almost a year, in addition to whatever perks that he enjoys. Again, it's only amateur for the kids, for the players, and then it's professional for everybody else. But what I was getting at before is that I don't know a pure free market economy that might just be too easily corruptible. But I think you can find a way, and people a lot more smarter and a lot more experienced than I am in the economics of this have come up with ways of dealing with how to compensate players, how to deal with with escrow accounts for them to access later in life, to have a fair system that measures the value of the players, or maybe uses a favored nations system where everybody gets the same. I mean, you have to be, I think, it has to be a little bit more or a little bit better regulated than just kind of letting the boosters see how much money they can raise and throw at a kid. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, it kind of the economies of the NFL are in part of what kind of turns me off to professional sports. I'm much more interested and engaged in college sports and particularly college football as a result. So, but I think we're all over the bullshit or the veneer of the purity of of college sports by now. This idea that an athletic director could get a bonus, a pay bonus, for a wrestler in an individual sport for getting a national championship. The wrestler gets nothing, but the athletic director gets a bonus because he has a kicker in his contract that whenever a national championship is earned, he gets, a six-figure bonus check or whatever it is. Now, that's not even a whole team sport. That's an individual sport. One individual accomplished this, and you're paying somebody else for his achievement. I mean, that's just outrageous on its face.
Wow.
Yeah, that's corruption defined right there. And it's not to the student-athlete's benefit because there are no student-athletes. You're right. They're pro athletes without the pro benefits. And even when they become pros, and I've basically turned off the NFL. I can't stand how they exploit the players they have, the amount of money. I mean, the NFL franchise, if the LA Clippers can sell for $2 billion, what are the New York Giants worth? And how many players get paid nothing? Look, and players are great. Mike Leake just signed a contract, and who knows who Mike Leake is? I do because I follow baseball a little bit, but he's a middling pitcher. He makes as much as Tom Brady does.
Wow, bless his heart, and I'm okay with that in so much as that's somehow we can't seem to find a way to pay our teachers or our police officers or our soldiers. Hell, we can't even seem to afford health care for our soldiers who we send off to war. But yet billions of dollars have found a way to go astray in Iraq and in Afghanistan. I mean, money that we have no idea where it went, either to private contractors or to corrupt government officials. We just have no idea. Yet we can't. But it's like the same thing there. It's like if that's what a pitcher is worth, I don't begrudge him his hustle. You know what I mean? I don't begrudge any man his earned success. But the bottom line is that there's obviously it makes it less engaging for me. Where it's like you got a billionaire owner paying a bunch of millionaires, and I have a lot more interest in following individual players, who went to went to play for the Hurricanes, for example, than I do in any specific team who supposedly, represents me or my city or whatever. And we all know, let's face it, if any of these owners gets a better deal or some municipality someplace else without a football, an NFL franchise says, we'll build you a $3 billion stadium tomorrow, they're going to up and leave wherever the hell they are. They don't give a shit about us or the fans or the city. They're businessmen. That's how come they got billions of dollars. Is not giving a shit about anybody else, but dealing with the bottom line. And again, how can municipalities afford to spend billions of dollars on football stadiums like in Oakland, but firing cops and teachers? I mean, that's America, baby. That's America.
Hey, I don't have a problem with Mike Leake making all the money he can. I just want to know who's catching Tom Brady's other checks he's not getting. Because Tom Brady should be getting a lot more money. If Mike Leake is worth $100 million or 85 or whatever he got, where's the rest of Tom Brady's money? That's what I want to know. That's why the NFL to me is silly, because these guys get paid and they're never guaranteed contracts. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, I've still got a couple good years left. Not in this league, you don't, and they're out.
And listen, Tom Brady is an exception to the rule, but the average career in the NFL is 3.3 seasons, and and they are on average the lowest paid players in professional sports in any of the American professional sports leagues anyway. They have the shortest average careers and the highest percentage of career-ending injury. So there's definitely, and they're the highest grossing league. So I think you're right. I think there's even a disparity in the free market economy in the NFL.
Yes, indeed. Hey, we've had you for an hour, man. Will you come back when it's time to promote?
Dude, I'll come back when it's time to promote anything.
Man, you got me. Awesome. This is our platform's your platform. Hey, throw us your Twitter stuff, your website, all those things, so we can get that and put it on the show as well.
Yeah, please check me out. Hit me up at Twitter at Billy Corben, that's Billycorben, not the front man for the Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corben. But, and of course, you go to CocaineCowboys.com. That'll redirect you to our website at racontour.com, RAKONTUR. And I do my best on social media. Sometimes it gets tough to try to reply to as many people as I can. So if you want to reach out, I look at social media and Twitter, not as a monologue, but a conversation. That's how it works best, I think. And so, if you want to hit me up, you want to tell me to go fuck myself or tell me that you love my work, either way, I'm game. I'm there.
Hey, well, we love your work. We hope you don't fuck yourself. We hope that we hope you find others to do that. And thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate you coming on the show for one. But really, seriously, the films that the stories that you've decided to tell, I think are the stories that our segment of the generation really, really loves and continues to be fascinated by.
Some of the best show prep I've ever had to do. Just watching your guys. You're just fantastic. I absolutely love your films. I love all the interviews and everything. I've watched all of it. During those pieces of time when my life is focused on your work, all I look at is what you're doing, and that is a great break, and I love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me, and I hope that we can continue to do the type of work that you guys enjoy.
Terrific. Thank you. Billy Corben.